My name is Matt McClary. I'm a parent of kids who go to Muddy Creek, and I've volunteered through my job at HP to come do Hour of Code at Muddy Creek in the past. So a lot of you have probably seen me at least once a year doing volunteer work at Muddy Creek. And this year you get a chance to do some coding as well. And I'm just going to give you this video intro to help answer some of your questions and kick off our activities. You can code for a lot of reasons. It can be a hobby or a job or something you do out of necessity. There's a growing industry of people coding for a lot of different applications, like the code that goes on phones and tablets or is used inside of corporations like banks and high-tech companies. There's also code that runs on devices in your house, like Wi-Fi routers. Even cars run software and firmware that's been coded by a programmer. So one question that I was asked is coding time-consuming? And I think it can take up whatever time you want to put into it. If you want to code as a hobby or a challenge, you can scale down how much time you put into it. If you're taking on a big project, then you might get excited and put in lots of time. If you do it as a full-time job, then it can be something you do every day, kind of like any adult going to work. So it can take time, but it can also, there's cool things that you can do with a short amount of time as well. Is coding hard? I think that I think it kind of has a stigma that it's hard, but I think once you give yourself a chance to go through the learning phases of coding, that it gets a lot easier. And just like learning a language or learning to ride a bike, there's a point at which you couldn't do it at all, and then there's a point at which it becomes a pretty easy thing. That's one of your skills. So it's gets easier as you learn it. Coding means explaining to a computer what it should do, and that's can take a lot of different languages and hardware. So things like phones and laptops, they have lots of different software that's coded on there, from the operating system that controls the hardware itself to internet-connected applications like Instagram or Minecraft. Those all take coding and are things that need to that we like to stay connected and use computers and devices for. Coding is used in a wide variety of professions. So I'll just list off a few of them. So inside of industries, businesses, corporations, they use software for tracking inventory, which is how much raw materials and for sale goods they have. Software is used in banking and finance to track how much money is changing hands, and software is also used in the automotive industry to control both the manufacture, testing, and how cars work when they're on the road. And then all kinds of electronics, if you think about things like televisions and internet devices, those have all been coded. There's also a whole area of coding that's around making web pages and making apps, which gets into more of the kind of graphic design and using images and layout to convey information. So there's quite a lot, and what you'll find is even if you're in different industries, sometimes coding is really close to the hardware. So you're doing very low-level operations that typically have to happen very quickly and reliably. And then there's higher level where your one line of code can make a whole lot of things happen, but it may take quite a bit of time and rely on a lot of different libraries. So that's called coding at a high level versus coding at a low level. And they're both very important. And you might find as you practice coding that you are drawn to one or the other, or you might like doing both. What I love about coding is the logic and some sort of accomplishment that I get from figuring out how to do something and telling a computer how to do it. So I really like making computers do work, and when I can make computers do work that make other people happy with the output, then I get a lot of job satisfaction and enjoyment from that. So a funny anecdote that comes to mind is sometimes people ask questions that sounds like a good question, but then when you try to answer it, it can lead to funny outcomes. I work in an industry that involves helping people print packaging in boxes, and I do the software that helps them do that. And so we got one question from a customer, and they wanted to know for a QR code, which looks like this. They wanted to know how large of a QR code our library could accommodate. So I kept putting in bigger and bigger numbers until it was, the size of a dinner plate, and I figured that was big enough. I told them they could make very, very large QR codes if they needed to, but it was just humorous how gigantic it got during my testing. So for the hour code this year, you're going to be using code.org to find your coding challenge and work through some of the levels, and I hope that you enjoy it and just approach it with an open mind. If you feel like you're getting stuck, just step back and let your creative mind work on it. You could even talk through it with a friend or family member, and that may help you come up with a creative solution. And I think just focus on having fun and seeing what you can do with your coding skills.